Officer from 3X GmbH. Please welcome Manny, Hachey.
I'm going to speed run through this. It was supposed to be more of a 20-minute thing, but I think it's going to work. Producing garbage, avoiding the pitfalls of game development, hopefully. This presentation is a lot around management, producing, founders, team leaders, so not really how a game developer themselves making a game for someone else can avoid, but how can you make sure that you as a leader and as a manager kind of treat the team and the project properly. Gonna try to go quickly. New release, fresh garbage, everything's great. So, how does one produce garbage? There's two elements that I will be touching on today in very high-level details. One is team and culture, and the other one is production design or product design. It's not just for video games. I think a lot of these things can be applied to various products. But since we're on the games industry, I'm going to have lots of game references, of course. But a lot of these things you'll read in general product management, team management books, company startups and founding. And yes, a dead parrot, because garbage is nice. So what are some of the worst mistakes that you can make with your team when it comes to development? And how can it lead to basically a atmosphere that might lead to a product which is not really the one that you wanted to have at the end? So I identified three things. No trust between the team. It can be on all directions. Team to management, management to team, department to department. A lack of trust between the team members is going to lead to a lot of mismanagement, micromanagement a lot as well. And yeah, not as optimal working as possible. Failure averse, so this is basically punishing failures, punishing mistake, potentially even going in the direction of someone losing their job if they report a mistake or having the feeling that they might lose a promotion or lose a job. This is one of the biggest killers of any product development, and more into that in a bit. And killing freedom. The freedom to explore, to have fun, to be creative, right? So allowing space for people to be their best selves, basically. Going again in micromanagement. So no trust. If you've ever watched Office Space, it's someone that's looking over your shoulder 100% of the time, coming in without a meeting, asking you, what are you doing? Why did you do this? Please explain to me why you didn't do A, B, C. There are times where these questions are possible, usually in post-mortems at the end of a sprint. You can make space for these questions, but not jumping in on, anyone. Killing freedom, the same thing, right? Why is the chair blue, not red? And they're like, really? Really? We have bigger eggs to fry, usually. I don't know if is that saying bigger eggs to fry? Bigger fish to fry. There's eggs as well, I'm sure. And failure averse, of course. I think that's the biggest problem. If you report a problem, you're seen as the problem. That is one of the biggest killers of any team, of any company management. You cannot have a positive corporate culture if you do not see mistakes as a learning cycle, right? Especially with juniors, they get very paranoid after a point, to the point that, burnouts are unavoidable. So, when it comes to failure averse, I have one anecdote. I'll go through it very quickly, but imagine you have a little construction worker who's working on a project, and at some point he notices he forgot a screw. And he thinks to himself, it's a small mistake, no one will notice. What's the worst thing that can happen if one single screw is missing? It's good that my boss didn't notice. Well, depends on the project, doesn't it? So there are companies out there, high-risk companies, where, like the aviation industry, they need to make sure people are not afraid to tell them something went wrong. Because it's not just a bad product, it's not just a bad launch, it is the lives of people at stake. And there are really real stories about this on how risk industries needed to change this culture from the ground up. And I think a lot can be learned there also in game development. And on the game-related side of things, What happens if you don't let people talk about mistakes, be open, have trust and creativity? Gollum happens. Thanks. So, product design. That was for team. I'm going really quickly. Have you answered the following questions about your product? So before you even start to put ink to paper or code to the engine, 3 questions. Who's the product for? Have you identified your audience? Are there people out there looking to even play this? Is this something that interests anyone other than yourself? Don't get me wrong, if you're making art, if you're making a game jam, an indie game that's just for you, do whatever you want. If you're trying to, put it out there, make money, get publishing, grow a company, you need to know this, and this is really important. What are the core pillars of your game? Same thing. You need to know what your game is about. What is it standing on? And when it comes to pillars, I really see them as metaphorical. We have pillars in this room. They're relatively important. If they're not built properly, the room doesn't hold. This is the same thing for a game. And can we build it on time and in budget? Another big thing. Make sure you have your eye on how many resources, how much are they costing you, and what are the assets? What's the scope of your game? Is it possible without crunch? Is it possible without having to go back and ask for extra money? And this is something that you don't just do in pre-production and you do it once and you forget about it. You need to go back to it over and over and over again after sprints, for example, to make sure, where are we? How far are we in the project? How much time, how much runway do I have left? And what are the chances crunch will happen? And is it avoidable? Can I cut away something? But be careful with the cutting. So, key market ready. This is just, do you have an audience? Don't sell summer clothes in a snowstorm. It's not going to work, right? Don't go out there selling a Super Nintendo game if the Switch is out. It's a stupid idea. It's around simple, but I think a lot of people, follow trends, but they might be too late to the party, or they get to the point that they want to make something that might be too early, actually. So the market might not be ready for them. And does the audience want it? Is there anyone out there interested? And you can test this relatively easily. It takes you one pager, one marketing image, one Facebook page or social media posts. Is anyone out there listening to what you have to sell? And that's much cheaper than making a whole prototype to learn at one point at Gamescom at the Indie Arena booth that actually no one wants to play your game. So I think you need to kind of try to check this as soon as possible and find ways to interact with an audience and see if they're interested. So the core game pillars. I prefer pillars over USP because unique selling points is a combination of everything. The pillar should represent what your game means, and there's different kind of pillars out there. But the whole thing will be built on these pillars unless you want to be a micromanager. So the pillars should be the big framework in which your designers, your artists, and so on will work into. And you can continue refining them, of course, and that will happen naturally in pre-production. But you want to give as much freedom to the team as possible, right? Don't kill freedom. The pillars will help with this a lot. Make sure they're clear, accepted, and communicated to the team. They're written down somewhere central. People know what they mean. You've had meetings about them. Everything disseminates from these pillars. What kind of pillars exist? Oh, that's gone. Okay, whatever. There's one slide missing. But just an overview of pillars. It can be anything from a genre, right? Like a walking simulator. It's both a mechanic and a genre. So that's already a pillar that gives you a good idea of what kind of game you have. It can be a theme, a philosophy. For example, grief has been one that we've seen in the last years, right? How to deal with death, with the passing. That is also a theme. It can go into a narrative game and so on. Player agency. If that is one of your pillars, then that should appear in all elements of your game. And in the next image is, what happens if your pillars are wobbly? It doesn't matter what number of them you have. You can have 10 pillars, I don't recommend it. Usually 3 to 5 is kind of okay to go into, but you need to make sure that they are solid and you're not watering them down and making sure that the team sees them clearly. You can also have a single pillar. A single idea, but it's really good, and you can build your entire game on it. It doesn't need to be a big game, it can be small ones as well. But, you know, just when you think about it, you don't need 10 of them, as long as they're good, clear, meaningful, and easily communicated, to the team especially. So what are some games that have had wobbly pillars in the past, especially this year? So here are some of the examples where you see something must have been misaligned, something was cut, or it was watered down, it was not put properly, it was not developed in the right way. And some other ones you have, you know, successful games, simple games, but also extremely complex games. Baldur's Gate is very complex. It has many pillars, but once you play the game, you realize, yeah, like player agency, the RPG elements, right, progression, stuff like that, and it's done very, very, very well. Firewatch, oh my god, you walk around and you listen to someone talk to you. That's basically the two things in the game, but it works. It works with everything else that was around it. It had a feel to it that must have been communicated to the team, like, yeah, oh, I want to jump, or I want to do, like, why isn't there any action, or blah, blah. No, it's a story that you walk around. And so you don't need them to be very complicated, you just need them to be good. Solid. Time and budget, this one is a bit faster. You have an idea, how much time do you have, will be your budget. I highly recommend that you break down your game as soon as you can into an asset list. It doesn't need to be detailed. You can say, I think we need 4 NPCs. And then you have NPC 1, NPC 2. You'll give them names later. You'll decide how they look like later. But if you know it's a 2D or 3D art, you have an estimate in days that you can give to these assets, right? A code feature, sound, music, QA. You can give a general estimate to these hours, to these working days. And once you have this in an Excel sheet, it will tell you, and you can mix this up. If you know your budget, you know, then you'll know how much time that you can have, and then they'll give you how big the idea can be. So this formula can be kind of switched around. But it's really important to break it down. Or you can end up with Gollum. Sorry. So in conclusion, it's impossible to create your magnum opus every time you develop something or create something. No one is expecting you to have a runaway hit every single time you make a game. Fair enough. But by treating your team well, this one's very important, managing expectations, not just for yourself, for your team, for your shareholders, for your publishers, but also for the audience. That's also very important. Don't promise a AAA if you're making a AA. Having good understanding of the market, the budget available, you can avoid producing absolute garbage. And becoming part of the new genre, the Gollum life. And that's it. That's me. I have no idea how much time. Nice. I did it in 15 minutes, apparently. That's really good. By the way, my name is Manny. I have over 13 years experience making games, 7 of them as Chief Operations Officer of our indie studio at Threeks. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. If you have questions, I'm just hanging around here. So, bye.